The therapy session that was supposed to be Dr. Anna Clark's breakthrough moment with her most challenging schizophrenic patient became her last. After 18 months of intensive treatment with Marcus Delano, she believed she had finally reached him. But when she walked out of that session room at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, she vanished completely. Before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this one, leaving behind only her notes that read, "Patient shows remarkable clarity. Breakthrough achieved." 2 years later, police would discover that Marcus's basement held the terrifying truth about what really happened in those final minutes. Dr. Anna Clark had always been drawn to the most difficult cases. At 34, she was considered one of the most promising psychiatrists at St. Helena's Psychiatric Institute in Seattle. Her colleagues respected her dedication, though some questioned her willingness to take on patients that others had given up on. Marcus Delano was exactly that kind of patient. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the psychiatric ward as Dr. Clark prepared for what she hoped would be a pivotal session. Marcus had been admitted 18 months earlier after a violent episode at his apartment complex. Neighbors had called police when they heard him screaming about the voices in the walls and throwing furniture. When officers arrived, they found Marcus cowering in his bathroom, convinced that his neighbors were poisoning him through the ventilation system. The diagnosis was clear: paranoid schizophrenia with severe auditory and visual hallucinations. What made Marcus's case particularly challenging was his intelligence. Before his mental breakdown, he had been a successful software engineer, capable of creating complex programs and managing intricate systems. This intelligence made him exceptionally good at manipulating conversations and hiding the extent of his delusions from medical staff. Dr. Clark reviewed his file one final time before their appointment. Previous psychiatrists had noted his tendency to become violent when confronted about his hallucinations. He had attacked 2 orderlies and thrown a chair at Dr. Peterson, his previous therapist, before being transferred to Dr. Clark's care. The medication had helped control his violent outbursts, but his delusions remained deeply entrenched. Marcus was already waiting in the session room when Dr. Clark arrived. This was unusual. Typically, patients were escorted to therapy sessions and would arrive exactly on time. Marcus must have asked to come early, which could indicate either anxiety or anticipation about their meeting. "Good afternoon, Marcus," Dr. Clark said, settling into her chair across from him. "How are you feeling today?" Marcus looked different. For the first time in months, he made direct eye contact with her. His usually disheveled hair was neatly combed, and he sat upright rather than hunched over as he typically did during their sessions. "Better, Dr. Clark. Much better," he replied, his voice clear and steady. Gone was the mumbling, distracted tone that had characterized their previous meetings. "I've been thinking about our last conversation, about what you said regarding the difference between reality and perception." Dr. Clark felt a flutter of excitement. This was the kind of cognitive engagement she had been working toward for months. "That's wonderful to hear, Marcus. Can you tell me more about your thoughts? I realize now that the voices I've been hearing, they're not real, are they?" Marcus asked, leaning forward slightly. "They're symptoms of my illness. The neighbors aren't actually plotting against me. The government isn't monitoring me through my television. These are delusions caused by my brain chemistry." Dr. Clark had to consciously control her expression to avoid showing too much enthusiasm. After 18 months of Marcus insisting that his hallucinations were real, this admission represented a massive breakthrough. "What helped you come to this realization?" she asked carefully. Marcus smiled, something she had never seen him do before. "You did, Dr. Clark. Your patience, your consistency. Even when I was hostile or refused to cooperate, you kept coming back. You never gave up on me. I've been taking my medication regularly, and I think it's finally working." They spent the next 40 minutes discussing Marcus's insights into his condition. He spoke about recognizing the onset of auditory hallucinations and using coping mechanisms to manage them. He expressed genuine remorse for his past behavior and gratitude for Dr. Clark's persistence. As their session neared its end, Dr. Clark made notes in his file. "Patient shows remarkable clarity, breakthrough achieved, demonstrates insight into illness, accepts medication compliance importance, shows genuine emotional engagement, Recommend continued therapy with focus on relapse prevention. Dr. Clark, Marcus said as she was writing, I want you to know that you've given me my life back. I don't know how to thank you properly. Seeing you make this progress is thanks enough, she replied warmly. I'm proud of how hard you've worked to get to this point. Marcus stood up as their session ended, extending his hand to her. I'll never forget what you've done for me, he said, shaking her hand firmly. Dr. Clark left the session feeling more optimistic than she had in months. She stopped by the nurses' station to update Marcus's care plan and spoke briefly with Dr. Richards about potentially moving Marcus to a less restrictive environment. That's remarkable progress, Dr. Richards commented. Marcus has been one of our most challenging patients. What do you think made the difference? Consistency and patience, Dr. Clark replied. Sometimes it takes longer than we expect, but breakthrough moments like this remind me why I chose this profession. It was 4:47 p.m. when Dr. Clark left St. Helena's that Tuesday afternoon. Security cameras showed her walking to her silver Honda Civic in the staff parking lot. She placed her briefcase in the passenger seat and drove toward the exit gate. The last image of Dr. Anna Clark showed her car pausing at the security checkpoint. Before disappearing into Seattle traffic, she never made it home. When Dr. Anna Clark failed to arrive for her 8 a.m. appointment the following morning, her secretary, Janet Morrison, initially assumed she was running late. Dr. Clark was known for her punctuality, but traffic in Seattle could be unpredictable. When she missed her second appointment at 9:30 a.m. without calling, Janet became concerned. This isn't like Dr. Clark at all, Janet told Dr. Richards when he stopped by to check on the morning schedule. She's never missed an appointment without calling ahead. Dr. Richards tried calling Dr. Clark's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He then called her home number. No answer. Growing worried, he decided to drive to her apartment during his lunch break. Dr. Clark lived in a quiet residential area about 15 minutes from the hospital. Her silver Honda Civic was not in its assigned parking space. Dr. Richards spoke with the building manager, who confirmed that he had not seen Dr. Clark since the previous day. She's a very regular tenant, the manager explained. Always parks in the same spot, always checks her mail at the same time each evening. I would have noticed if she'd come home last night. By 2 p.m., Dr. Richards had contacted the Seattle Police Department. Detective Sarah Martinez was assigned to the case. At 38, Detective Martinez had spent 12 years with the department and specialized in missing persons cases. She understood that the first 48 hours were critical. Let's start with the basics, Detective Martinez said during her initial interview with hospital staff. Did Dr. Clark have any personal problems? Relationship issues? Financial troubles? Any reason she might want to disappear? The consensus among her colleagues was clear. Dr. Clark loved her work and had no apparent reason to disappear voluntarily. She was dedicated to her patients, maintained good relationships with staff, and had never shown signs of distress or instability. If anything, she seemed happier than usual yesterday, Janet recalled. She was excited about a breakthrough with one of her patients. She mentioned that she felt like all her hard work was finally paying off. Detective Martinez reviewed the security footage from St. Helena's. The cameras clearly showed Dr. Clark leaving the building at 4:47 p.m., walking normally to her car and driving away. There were no signs of distress or indication that she was being followed. The detective expanded her investigation to Dr. Clark's usual route home. Traffic cameras captured her Honda Civic at several intersections, but the trail went cold about halfway to her apartment. The last confirmed sighting was at 5:23 p.m. at the intersection of Pine Street and 4th Avenue. Dr. Clark's credit cards and bank accounts showed no activity after Tuesday afternoon. Her cell phone had been turned off or destroyed. The last signal was detected near the waterfront district at 5:45 p.m. This suggests either voluntary disappearance or foul play, Detective Martinez explained to Dr. Richards during a follow-up interview. But given what you've told me about Dr. Clark's character and dedication to her work, foul play seems more likely. The investigation expanded to include Dr. Clark's personal life. She had been divorced for 3 years, but maintained an amicable relationship with her ex-husband, David, who lived in Portland. Phone records confirmed that they had not spoken in over 2 weeks, and David had a solid alibi for Tuesday evening. He was attending a work conference in Vancouver with dozens of witnesses. Dr. Clark's friends and family described her as stable, happy, and committed to her career. There were no romantic relationships that might have led to personal drama. Her financial situation was solid, and she had no known enemies. As the investigation entered its second week, Detective Martinez began focusing on Dr. Clark's patients. While patient confidentiality laws limited access to specific medical information, she was able to review general case files with hospital administration present. "We need to consider the possibility that one of her patients might be involved," Detective Martinez explained to Dr. Richards. "Did Dr. Clark ever express concerns about her safety? Did any patients make threats or show inappropriate behavior toward her?" Dr. Richards reviewed the list of Dr. Clark's current patients. Most were long-term residents with chronic conditions who posed minimal risk. However, a few names stood out as potentially concerning. "Marcus Delano has a history of violence," Dr. Richards noted. "He's been here for 18 months and has attacked staff members in the past." Interestingly, Dr. Clark had just had what she described as a breakthrough session with him on the day she disappeared. Detective Martinez made a note to interview Marcus, but hospital protocol required that such interviews be conducted with medical staff present and with proper legal protections in place for the patient. 2 weeks after Dr. Clark's disappearance, the case was featured on local news programs. The hospital offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to her safe return. Tips began pouring in, but most led nowhere. Claimed sightings in other cities, speculation about possible motives, and unfortunately, several hoax calls from people seeking attention. One tip, however, caught Detective Martinez's attention. A caller reported seeing a silver Honda Civic parked behind an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district on the night Dr. Clark disappeared. The caller, who worked security for a nearby shipping company, had noticed the car because it seemed out of place in an area typically frequented only by commercial vehicles. Detective Martinez and her partner, Detective Johnson, investigated the warehouse the following day. The building had been vacant for 6 months, previously used by a textile company that had relocated to cheaper facilities outside the city. The property was surrounded by a chain-link fence, but several sections had been cut, providing easy access. Inside the warehouse, they found evidence that someone had been using the space recently. There were signs of a temporary camp in one corner, blankets, empty food containers, and drug paraphernalia, suggesting that homeless individuals had been sheltering there. More concerning was what they found near the loading dock: tire tracks in the dust that appeared consistent with a Honda Civic, and several drops of what looked like dried blood. "We need to process this entire scene," Detective Martinez told the crime scene technicians. "If Dr. Clark was brought here, there might be evidence we can use." The blood drops were too degraded to provide DNA evidence, and the tire tracks, while consistent with Dr. Clark's vehicle, were not unique enough to prove definitively that her car had been there. However, the discovery gave investigators their first potential lead. During the warehouse investigation, Detective Martinez received an unexpected call from St. Helena's. Dr. Richards sounded agitated. "Detective, you need to come back to the hospital immediately," he said. "We've had an incident with Marcus Delano. He's been asking repeatedly about Dr. Clark, wanting to know when she's coming back. When we told him she was unavailable, he became violent and had to be sedated." Detective Martinez felt a chill. While it wasn't unusual for patients to become attached to their therapists, Marcus's reaction seemed excessive, especially given his history of violence. "We're going to need to interview him as soon as he's stable enough," she told Dr. Richards. "And I want a complete review of his activities on the day Dr. Clark disappeared." As the investigation approached its 3rd week, Detective Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus Delano was somehow connected to Dr. Clark's disappearance. However, proving that connection would require more evidence than they currently had, and Marcus's status as a psychiatric patient complicated any potential questioning. Little did she know that the truth was much closer than she realized, hidden beneath the very ground where Marcus had been living before his hospitalization. To understand Marcus Delano's potential involvement in Dr. Clark's disappearance, Detective Martinez knew she needed to delve deeper into his history. What she discovered painted a disturbing picture of a brilliant mind consumed by paranoia and violence. Marcus had been born in Seattle 31 years earlier to Dr. Helena Delano, a respected neurologist, and Professor James Delano, who taught computer science at the University of Washington. He had grown up in an affluent neighborhood, attended private schools, and showed exceptional promise in mathematics and technology from an early age. His childhood appeared normal on the surface, but interviews with former teachers and family friends revealed troubling patterns. Marcus had been a solitary child, exceptionally intelligent but struggling with social interactions. Teachers noted his tendency to become fixated on perceived slights and his difficulty accepting criticism. Marcus was brilliant, but he had this way of making other children uncomfortable, recalled Mrs. Peterson, his fifth-grade teacher. He would stare at them for long periods and seem to take mental notes about their behavior. It was like he was studying them rather than trying to be friends. In high school, Marcus excelled academically but remained isolated socially. He graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to MIT, where he studied computer science and software engineering. His professors remembered him as exceptionally gifted, but noted concerns about his increasing paranoia and conspiracy theories. Marcus believed that technology companies were using software to monitor people's thoughts, explained Dr. Robert Chen, one of his MIT professors. At first, we thought it was just creative thinking about privacy issues, but it became clear that he genuinely believed these things were happening. Despite his growing paranoia, Marcus completed his degree with honors and was recruited by several major tech companies. He accepted a position with Quantum Systems, a Seattle-based software development firm specializing in security applications. For the first 3 years, Marcus appeared to thrive professionally. He developed several innovative security protocols and was promoted to senior software engineer. His colleagues respected his technical abilities, though they found him increasingly difficult to work with on a personal level. Marcus was incredibly talented, but he was becoming more and more suspicious of everyone around him, recalled Jennifer Walsh, his former project manager. He would accuse co-workers of sabotaging his code or stealing his ideas. He started working exclusively at night to avoid interactions with other staff members. The first major incident occurred during Marcus's 4th year at Quantum Systems. He accused his supervisor, Tom Richardson, of accessing his computer to steal proprietary algorithms. When the company investigated, they found no evidence of unauthorized access to Marcus's files. However, Marcus insisted that the evidence had been deleted by conspirators within the company. Marcus became convinced that the entire company was involved in industrial espionage, Tom Richardson explained to Detective Martinez during a phone interview. He claimed that our clients were actually government agencies using our software to spy on American citizens. When we tried to reason with him, he became increasingly agitated and paranoid. The situation escalated when Marcus installed unauthorized surveillance software on company computers, claiming he needed to monitor potential security breaches. When discovered, this resulted in his immediate termination and a restraining order preventing him from returning to company property. After losing his job, Marcus retreated to his apartment and became increasingly isolated. He used his savings to purchase advanced surveillance equipment and spent months documenting what he believed were government monitoring activities in his neighborhood. His parents, Dr. Helena and Professor James Delano, became concerned about his behavior and attempted to convince him to seek psychiatric help. Marcus responded by cutting off all contact with them, convinced that they had been compromised by government agents. "We tried everything," Dr. Helena Delano told Detective Martinez during a tearful interview. "We consulted with psychiatric specialists, tried to stage interventions, even considered having him involuntarily committed. But Marcus was very good at appearing rational during brief interactions. He could control his paranoia long enough to convince authorities that he wasn't a danger to himself or others." Marcus's descent into complete psychosis occurred gradually over several months. Neighbors began reporting strange behavior. He would stand at his windows for hours with binoculars, convinced he was documenting surveillance activities. He installed multiple locks on his apartment door and covered his windows with aluminum foil to block electronic monitoring devices. The incident that led to his hospitalization occurred on a Tuesday evening in March, almost exactly 2 years before Dr. Clark's disappearance. Marcus had become convinced that his neighbors were pumping toxic gas into his apartment through the ventilation system. In his panic, he began throwing furniture and screaming for help. When police arrived, They found Marcus barricaded in his bathroom, holding a kitchen knife and claiming that the voices in the walls were giving him instructions. It took 3 officers and a paramedic to safely subdue him, and he was immediately transported to St. Helena's for psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Peterson, the psychiatrist who initially treated Marcus, documented severe paranoid delusions, auditory hallucinations, and a complete break from reality. Marcus insisted that his hospitalization was part of the conspiracy against him and that the medical staff were government agents in disguise. Marcus was one of the most challenging patients I'd ever encountered, Dr. Peterson explained to Detective Martinez. His intelligence made him exceptionally manipulative. He would appear to be making progress, then suddenly become violent when he felt his delusions were being challenged. After he threw a chair at me during one session, I recommended that he be transferred to a specialist with more experience in treating violent patients. That specialist was Dr. Anna Clark. Detective Martinez reviewed Dr. Clark's initial assessment of Marcus, written 18 months before her disappearance. Patient demonstrates severe paranoid schizophrenia with complex delusion systems involving government surveillance and neighborhood conspiracies. Intelligence level complicates treatment as patient can construct elaborate explanations for contradictory evidence. Recommend long-term therapy focused on building trust and gradual reality testing. What struck Detective Martinez was Dr. Clark's optimistic tone despite the challenges. She had genuinely believed she could help Marcus, and according to hospital records, she had spent more time with him than any previous therapist. Dr. Clark had a gift for connecting with difficult patients, Dr. Richards explained. She saw Marcus's intelligence as an asset rather than an obstacle. She believed that if she could reach the rational part of his mind, she could help him distinguish between reality and delusion. The progress notes showed a gradual improvement in Marcus's condition over the 18 months of treatment. His violent episodes decreased. He began participating in group therapy sessions, and he even expressed interest in eventually returning to work in a limited capacity. The final entry in his file, written by Dr. Clark on the day she disappeared, painted a picture of remarkable progress. Marcus demonstrates unprecedented clarity regarding his condition. He acknowledges his delusions as symptoms rather than reality and expresses genuine gratitude for treatment. This represents a major breakthrough after months of careful work. But Detective Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with this narrative. If Marcus had truly achieved such clarity about his condition, why had he become violent when told that Dr. Clark was unavailable? And why was he so insistent on knowing when she would return? As she reviewed the case files, Detective Martinez noticed something that made her pause. Marcus's address before his hospitalization was listed as 1247 Cedar Street, a house rather than an apartment. All the reports about his breakdown had mentioned an apartment, but his permanent address was a single-family home. I need to check out Marcus's house, she told Detective Johnson. If he was living in an apartment when he was hospitalized, what happened to the house on Cedar Street? The answer to that question would prove to be more significant than Detective Martinez could have imagined. 1247. Cedar Street sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a middle-class neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown Seattle. Detective Martinez drove past the house twice before parking across the street to observe it more carefully. The property appeared abandoned. The lawn was overgrown, newspapers had accumulated on the front porch, and several windows had been boarded up. A "for sale" sign in the front yard indicated that the house had been on the market for over a year. Detective Martinez contacted the real estate agent listed on the sign. Margaret Rothwell had been trying to sell the property since shortly after Marcus's hospitalization began. "It's been a nightmare," Margaret explained during their phone conversation. The owner, Marcus Delano, signed papers giving his parents power of attorney when he was hospitalized. They wanted to sell the house to help pay for his medical care, but we've had nothing but problems. "What kind of problems?" Detective Martinez asked. "Strange things," Margaret replied. "Potential buyers would schedule showings, but many would leave within minutes of entering the house. They claimed it had an odd smell or that it felt wrong somehow. We've had the house professionally cleaned multiple times, but people still seem uncomfortable there." Detective Martinez asked for permission to examine the property. Margaret agreed to meet her there the following afternoon with keys and the full property disclosure information. The house was a modest two-story structure built in the 1960s. The exterior showed signs of neglect, but the bones of the building appeared solid. Margaret led Detective Martinez through the front door into a living room that felt immediately oppressive. "Do you smell that?" Margaret asked as they entered. Detective Martinez did notice an unusual odor. Not quite decay, but something organic and unpleasant that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. The smell was strongest near the back of the house. "We've had pest control specialists check for dead animals in the walls," Margaret explained. "They found nothing, but that smell has been here since we first listed the property." They walked through the main floor systematically. The living room contained furniture covered in dust sheets. The kitchen appeared normal, though outdated. A small dining room connected to a hallway that led to what had been Marcus's home office. The office told a disturbing story. Although most of Marcus's belongings had been removed, evidence of his paranoia remained. Holes had been drilled in the walls where he had apparently installed surveillance equipment. Maps of the neighborhood were still tacked to one wall, marked with colored pins and detailed notes about his neighbor's activities. His parents had most of his personal items removed when they decided to sell, Margaret explained. But they left some things in the basement that were too difficult to move. As they descended the basement stairs, the strange odor became stronger. The basement was partially finished, with a small recreation room at the bottom of the stairs and a utility area toward the back of the house. Detective Martinez immediately noticed something odd about the layout. According to the house plans Margaret had brought, the basement should have extended further back under the kitchen area. However, there appeared to be a wall blocking off that section. "Was this wall here originally?" Detective Martinez asked, examining the newer-looking drywall that separated the finished area from what should have been additional basement space. Margaret consulted her paperwork. The original floor plans show this as one large basement space. This wall must have been added later, probably by Marcus. Detective Martinez felt her pulse quicken. A walled-off section of basement in the home of a psychiatric patient who had shown violent tendencies toward his therapist could not be a coincidence. "I need to get a search warrant for this property," she told Margaret. "There might be evidence related to an ongoing investigation." "What kind of evidence?" Margaret asked, clearly concerned about the implications for the property sale. "I can't discuss the details, but I'll need you to remove the house from the market temporarily while we conduct our investigation." That evening, Detective Martinez presented her findings to her supervisor, Captain Rodriguez. The connection between Marcus Delano and Dr. Clark, combined with the mysterious wall in his basement, provided sufficient probable cause for a search warrant. "If Dr. Clark is somewhere in that house, we need to find her quickly," Captain Rodriguez said. "But given the time that's passed, we should prepare for the worst-case scenario." The search warrant was approved the following morning. Detective Martinez assembled a team that included forensic specialists, cadaver dogs, and structural engineers who could safely remove the basement wall. The team arrived at 1247 Cedar Street at 8 a.m. on a crisp October morning. Neighbors gathered on their porches to watch the unusual activity, unaware that they were about to witness the conclusion of a mystery that had haunted the community for 2 years. The cadaver dogs were brought in first to scan the accessible areas of the house. Within minutes, both animals began showing intense interest in the basement wall. Their handlers confirmed what Detective Martinez had feared. There was almost certainly human remains behind that barrier. "We need to document everything before we start removing the wall," the forensic photographer explained. "If this is a crime scene, we can't afford to miss any evidence." The team spent 2 hours photographing and measuring the basement before beginning the careful removal of the drywall. What they found behind that wall would shock even experienced investigators. The hidden section of the basement had been converted into a makeshift prison cell. The concrete walls were lined with sound dampening. Foam and heavy chains had been bolted to the floor. A small cot sat in one corner, next to a bucket that had apparently served as a toilet. But most disturbing was what they found on a makeshift desk against the far wall: Dr. Anna Clark's purse, her car keys, and her hospital identification badge. Next to these items was a thick notebook filled with Marcus's handwriting, a detailed diary of his interactions with Dr. Clark during her captivity. Detective Martinez carefully opened the notebook, wearing latex gloves to preserve potential evidence. The first entry was dated the day Dr. Clark disappeared. Tuesday, 4:47 p.m. Dr. Clark has arrived at the house. She believes she is here to help me move some belongings to the hospital. She doesn't yet understand that our therapy sessions will be continuing here, where we won't be interrupted by hospital schedules and other patients. She seems confused about why I brought her here instead of taking her home. I explained that this is my real home, the place where I can think clearly without the medications they force on me at the hospital. The entries continued for several weeks, documenting a horrifying scenario in which Marcus had kept Dr. Clark imprisoned while conducting his own version of therapy sessions. His delusions had convinced him that the hospital was corrupting their therapeutic relationship and that he needed to save Dr. Clark from the conspiracy that surrounded them. Friday, day 12. Dr. Clark continues to insist that I am having a psychotic episode and that keeping her here is not helping either of us. She doesn't understand that the real Dr. Clark, the one who cared about my progress, would want to continue our work together. The woman upstairs is being influenced by the same forces that corrupted the hospital staff. I need to help her remember who she really is. As Detective Martinez read further, she realized that Marcus's delusions had evolved during Dr. Clark's captivity. He had become convinced that the person he was holding was not actually Dr. Clark, but an imposter sent to replace her. This belief had apparently justified increasingly disturbing behavior. Monday, day 18. The imposter is becoming more resistant to treatment. She refuses to acknowledge her true identity and continues to claim that she is Dr. Clark. I have had to restrict her movement further to prevent her from interfering with my efforts to contact the real Dr. Clark. The basement is the only place where the government monitoring equipment cannot reach us. The final entries in the notebook painted a picture of Marcus's complete break from reality. He had apparently become convinced that multiple imposters were being sent to replace Dr. Clark and that he needed to eliminate them to protect the real doctor. Thursday, day 23. I have realized that they will continue sending imposters until I take decisive action. The woman in the basement is not Dr. Clark and never was. She is a tool of the conspiracy, designed to make me believe that Dr. Clark has been captured or corrupted. I must dispose of this imposter so that the real Dr. Clark can return to help me. The notebook ended there, but the implications were clear. Dr. Clark had been murdered by a patient who believed he was protecting her from herself. But Detective Martinez noticed something troubling. There was no body in the basement cell. Dr. Clark's personal items were there, along with evidence of her prolonged captivity. But where was she? The answer came when the forensic team began examining the concrete floor more carefully. In one corner of the cell, they discovered an area where the concrete appeared to have been broken up and then patched with newer material. "We're going to need jackhammers," the lead forensic specialist announced. "If Dr. Clark is here, she's under this floor." As the team prepared to break through the concrete, Detective Martinez couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Dr. Clark had believed she was helping Marcus achieve a breakthrough, not realizing that his apparent progress was actually the product of an elaborate delusion that cast her as both savior and threat. The truth about Dr. Anna Clark's final days was about to be revealed, buried beneath the foundation of the house where her patient had tried to create his own twisted version of reality. The jackhammers began their work at 2 p.m., their rhythmic pounding echoing through the basement of 1247 Cedar Street. Detective Martinez stood at the top of the stairs, watching as forensic specialists carefully broke through the concrete patch that had caught their attention. The process was painstakingly slow. Each piece of concrete had to be photographed and catalogued before removal, ensuring that no potential evidence was destroyed in the excavation. The team worked in shifts to prevent fatigue from compromising their precision. After 3 hours of careful work, the jackhammer operator stopped and called for Detective Martinez. "We've hit something," he announced, his voice carrying a grim tone that she had heard too many times before. Detective Martinez descended into the basement, now thick with concrete dust despite the ventilation system the team had installed. What? She saw confirmed her worst fears. A section of blue fabric was visible through the broken concrete. "We need to switch to hand tools from here," the forensic photographer announced. "We can't risk damaging whatever's down there." The next phase of the excavation took 4 more hours. Using brushes, small shovels, and dental picks, the team carefully removed concrete debris from around what was clearly a human body. As more of the remains became visible, the tragic story of Dr. Anna Clark's final days began to unfold. The body was wrapped in several layers of plastic sheeting and positioned in a shallow grave that had been carved out of the dirt beneath the basement floor. The concrete had been poured directly over the grave, creating a makeshift tomb that might never have been discovered if not for the cadaver dog's sensitive noses. Dr. Amanda Foster, the county coroner, arrived as the excavation neared completion. She examined the remains while they were still partially buried, making preliminary observations that would guide the full autopsy. The body appears to be that of a woman, approximately 30 to 40 years old, Dr. Foster announced to the assembled team. Based on the clothing fragments and the state of decomposition, this is consistent with someone who died approximately 2 years ago. Detective Martinez felt a mix of relief and sorrow. After 2 years of uncertainty, they had finally found Dr. Clark. Her family would have closure, even though the outcome was not what anyone had hoped for. The personal effects found with the body confirmed the identification. Dr. Clark's wedding ring, a distinctive watch that had been a gift from her medical school graduating class, and a small pendant that her sister had given her for her birthday, just months before her disappearance. As the remains were carefully removed from the basement, Detective Martinez reflected on the complex psychological dynamics that had led to this tragedy. Marcus Delano's intelligence had made him a fascinating patient for Dr. Clark, but that same intelligence had also made him exceptionally dangerous when his delusions focused on her. "We need to arrest Marcus immediately," Captain Rodriguez told Detective Martinez as they watched the coroner's team prepare Dr. Clark's remains for transport. "Even if he's in a psychiatric facility, he needs to be formally charged with murder." The arrest took place the following morning at St. Helena's Psychiatric Institute. Marcus was in the middle of a group therapy session when Detective Martinez and 2 uniformed officers arrived with the warrant. Dr. Richards had prepared the hospital staff for this possibility, but seeing Marcus led away in handcuffs was still shocking for patients and staff who had grown accustomed to his presence over the past 2 years. Marcus's reaction to the arrest was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the entire investigation. As Detective Martinez read him his rights, he appeared calm and even relieved. "You found the imposter," he said as the handcuffs were applied. "I knew someone would eventually discover what she really was. This proves that Dr. Clark is still alive somewhere, doesn't it? When will she be coming back to continue our therapy session?" Even when confronted with the evidence of Dr. Clark's murder, Marcus remained trapped in his delusion that he had killed an imposter rather than his therapist. His mental illness had created a reality in which he was both victim and hero, protecting the woman he had actually killed. The preliminary autopsy results confirmed what the crime scene had suggested. Dr. Clark had died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely inflicted with a heavy object during a struggle. The timeline suggested that she had been held captive for approximately 3 weeks before her death. The victim showed signs of prolonged captivity, Dr. Foster explained to Detective Martinez. There are healing injuries consistent with restraints, and evidence of malnutrition suggests she was not adequately fed during her imprisonment. The psychological evaluation of Marcus, conducted by court-appointed psychiatrists, revealed the full extent of his delusions. He genuinely believed that Dr. Clark was still alive, and that he had saved her by eliminating multiple imposters who had been sent to replace her. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the forensic psychiatrist assigned to evaluate Marcus's competency to stand trial, spent dozens of hours interviewing him. Her report painted a picture of a brilliant mind completely untethered from reality. Mr. Delano has constructed an elaborate delusional system in which Dr. Clark exists as an idealized figure who represents his connection to sanity and wellness, Dr. Warren wrote. His illness has made it impossible for him to acknowledge that he killed the actual Dr. Clark, as this would destroy his belief that she represents his path to recovery. The legal proceedings that followed were complicated by Marcus's mental state. While there was overwhelming evidence of his guilt, his psychiatric condition raised questions about his competency to stand trial and his legal responsibility for his actions. District Attorney Robert Chen decided to pursue murder charges despite Marcus's mental illness, arguing that the premeditated nature of Dr. Clark's kidnapping and the elaborate steps taken to conceal her body demonstrated sufficient awareness of wrongdoing to warrant prosecution. The case attracted national attention as it raised fundamental questions about the treatment of mentally ill individuals and the risks faced by healthcare professionals who work with dangerous patients. Mental health advocacy groups argued that Marcus was as much a victim of inadequate psychiatric care as Dr. Clark was a victim of his violence. However, Dr. Clark's family felt differently. Her sister, Jennifer Clark Morrison, spoke at a press conference outside the courthouse. Anna dedicated her life to helping people like Marcus Delano. She believed in the possibility of recovery and healing, even for the most challenging patients. But her compassion and dedication should not have cost her life. Mental illness may explain Marcus's actions, but it cannot excuse them. As the legal proceedings continued, Detective Martinez found herself haunted by the case. She had seen many crime scenes during her career, but the basement on Cedar Street represented something uniquely disturbing: the complete breakdown of the therapeutic relationship that should have been a source of healing. The trial of Marcus Delano began on a cold Monday morning in February, almost 3 years after Dr. Anna Clark's disappearance. The courtroom was packed with media representatives, mental health professionals, and members of both families affected by the tragedy. Judge Patricia Hensley, a veteran of complex criminal cases, had spent weeks reviewing the extensive psychiatric evaluations and legal briefs filed by both sides. The central question was not whether Marcus had killed Dr. Clark — the evidence was overwhelming — but whether he was legally responsible for his actions given his severe mental illness. Prosecutor Janet Stevens opened the case with a methodical presentation of the evidence. She walked the jury through the timeline of events, from Dr. Clark's final therapy session to the discovery of her remains in Marcus's basement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Stevens began, "this case is about a brilliant woman whose life was cut short by the very person she was trying to help. Dr. Anna Clark believed in Marcus Delano's potential for recovery. She spent 18 months working with him, celebrating his progress and advocating for his treatment. Her reward for this dedication was to be kidnapped, imprisoned, and ultimately murdered by the patient she had tried so hard to save." Stevens presented the physical evidence systematically. Dr. Clark's personal items found in the basement cell, the diary documenting her captivity, and the forensic evidence from her remains. She also called several witnesses who testified about Marcus's history of violence and his obsessive behavior toward Dr. Clark. Janet Morrison, Dr. Clark's former secretary, provided particularly compelling testimony about Marcus's behavior in the weeks leading up to Dr. Clark's disappearance. He would call the office repeatedly, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, asking about Dr. Clark's schedule, Morrison testified. He wanted to know when her other appointments were, how long she would be available, whether she ever worked late. "At the time, I thought he was just eager about his therapy progress, but looking back, it seems like he was planning something." Dr. Richards testified about the final therapy session, and Dr. Clark's excitement about Marcus's apparent breakthrough. His testimony highlighted the tragic irony that Dr. Clark's murder had occurred at the moment she believed she had finally reached her patient. "Dr. Clark left that session more optimistic than I had seen her in months," Dr. Richards told the jury. "She believed she had achieved a genuine breakthrough with Marcus. She had no idea that his apparent clarity was actually part of an elaborate delusion that would lead to her death." The prosecution's case was strengthened by testimony from forensic experts who analyzed Marcus's diary entry. Dr. Patricia Knowles, a forensic psychologist, explained how Marcus's writings revealed a complex delusional system that cast Dr. Clark as both savior and threat. "Mr. Delano's delusions evolved during Dr. Clark's captivity," Dr. Knowles testified. "Initially, he believed he was protecting her from a conspiracy at the hospital. As her resistance to his treatment increased, his delusions shifted to the belief that she was an imposter. This progression shows a logical, albeit delusional, thought process that suggests awareness of his actions and their consequences." The defense, led by attorney Michael Barnes, did not dispute the facts of the case, but argued that Marcus's severe mental illness prevented him from forming the intent necessary for murder. Barnes had built his career defending clients with psychiatric conditions, and understood the complexities of presenting such cases to jury. Marcus Delano is not a cold-blooded killer, Barnes told the jury during his opening statement. He is a man whose brilliant mind was destroyed by schizophrenia, a disease that robbed him of his ability to distinguish between reality and delusion. When he took Dr. Clark's life, he was not acting with criminal intent. He was acting within a delusional framework that made him believe he was protecting her. The defense called several psychiatric experts who testified about the nature of schizophrenia and its impact on perception and judgment. Dr. Michael Chang, a prominent researcher in the field of psychotic disorders, explained how Marcus's intelligence had actually made his condition more dangerous. Highly intelligent individuals with schizophrenia often develop more sophisticated delusional systems, Dr. Chang testified. They can construct elaborate explanations for contradictory evidence and maintain their delusions even when confronted with reality. In Mr. Delano's case, his intelligence allowed him to create a complex narrative in which Dr. Clark needed to be saved from imposters and conspiracies. The defense also presented evidence about the inadequate mental health care system that had failed to properly treat Marcus before his encounter with Dr. Clark. They argued that his previous psychiatrists had dismissed his potential for violence and that the hospital had not implemented adequate safety protocols for high-risk patients. Dr. Folter. Elizabeth Warren, the forensic psychiatrist who had evaluated Marcus, provided crucial testimony for the defense. She explained how Marcus's delusions had completely distorted his perception of reality during the time he held Dr. Clark captive. Mr. Delano genuinely believed that Dr. Clark was being threatened by government agents and that the person he was holding was an imposter sent to replace her, Dr. Warren testified. His actions, while horrific, were consistent with his delusional belief system. He was not acting with malicious intent, but rather with what he perceived as protective necessity. However, the prosecution challenged this interpretation during cross-examination. Prosecutor Stevens pointed out that Marcus had demonstrated sufficient awareness of reality to plan Dr. Clark's kidnapping, conceal her imprisonment, and hide her body after her death. Dr. Warren, if Mr. Delano was truly unable to distinguish between reality and delusion, how do you explain his elaborate efforts to avoid detection? Stevens asked. He chose an isolated location for Dr. Clark's imprisonment, soundproofed the basement to prevent her calls for help from being heard, and carefully concealed her body to avoid discovery. These actions suggest a clear understanding that what he was doing was wrong and illegal. Dr. Warren acknowledged that Marcus's behavior showed planning and concealment, but maintained that these actions were driven by delusional thinking rather than criminal intent. Schizophrenia does not necessarily impair all cognitive functions, she explained. Mr. Delano retained the ability to plan and execute complex actions, but his motivations and perceptions were fundamentally distorted by his illness. He believed he was protecting Dr. Clark, not harming her. One of the most difficult moments in the trial came when Jennifer Clark Morrison, Dr. Clark's sister, testified about the impact of her sister's murder on their family. Anna was the most compassionate person I've ever known, Jennifer said through tears. She chose psychiatry because she wanted to help people who were suffering. She saw potential for healing in everyone, including Marcus Delano, but her compassion should not have cost her life. Mental illness may explain what happened, but it doesn't excuse it. The jury also heard testimony from other mental health professionals who had worked with potentially dangerous patients. Their testimony highlighted the ongoing debate within the psychiatric community about how to balance patient care with safety concerns. Dr. Robert Martinez, who had taken over Marcus's care after Dr. Clark's disappearance, testified about the challenges of treating violent psychiatric patients. We walk a fine line between providing therapeutic care and protecting public safety, Dr. Martinez explained. Dr. Clark believed in Marcus's potential for recovery, and her optimism was not misplaced. He had made genuine progress. But the tragic reality is that some patients remain dangerous even when they appear to be improving. As the trial entered its final phase, both sides presented closing arguments that captured the central tension of the case. The prosecution argued that Marcus's actions, regardless of his mental state, constituted premeditated murder that demanded justice. The defense maintained that Marcus was a victim of untreated mental illness who could not be held responsible for actions driven by psychotic delusions. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching their verdict. When they returned to the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Judge Hensley asked the foreman to read the verdict. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Marcus Delano, guilty. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Dr. Clark's family felt that justice had been served, while mental health advocates expressed concern about the implications for other patients with severe psychiatric conditions. Marcus himself showed no reaction to the verdict. He sat quietly in his chair, apparently lost in his own thoughts, still trapped within the delusional system that had led to Dr. Clark's death. During the sentencing phase, Judge Hensley acknowledged the complexity of the case and the legitimate concerns raised by both sides. "This case highlights the tragic intersection of mental illness and violence," she said. "While Mr. Delano's psychiatric condition provides context for his actions, it cannot excuse the premeditated murder of Dr. Anna Clark. However, given the defendant's mental state, I am sentencing him to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, to be served in a secure psychiatric facility where he can receive ongoing treatment for his condition." The sentence satisfied neither side completely, but it reflected the court's attempt to balance justice for Dr. Clark with recognition of Marcus's mental illness. In the months following Marcus Delano's conviction, the case continued to reverberate through the mental health community and beyond. St. Helena's Psychiatric Institute implemented new safety protocols for staff working with potentially violent patients, including mandatory security escorts for certain high-risk cases and improved emergency communication systems. Dr. Richards, who had served as interim head of the psychiatric department during the investigation and trial, was promoted to permanent director. One of his first initiatives was establishing the Anna Clark Memorial Fund, which provided grants for research into the treatment of violent psychiatric patients and support for families affected by mental health-related tragedies. "Anna would have wanted her death to contribute to better understanding and treatment of mental illness," Dr. Richards said during the fund's inaugural ceremony. "If we can prevent even one similar tragedy, her sacrifice will have meaning." The Fort case also prompted broader discussions about the training and protection of mental health professionals. Professional organizations began developing new guidelines for recognizing warning signs of patient fixation and implementing appropriate safeguards. Detective Martinez, who had become deeply invested in the case, found herself struggling with its resolution. While Marcus's conviction provided legal closure, questions about the mental health system's failures continued to trouble her. "I keep thinking about how different things might have been if Marcus had received more intensive treatment earlier," she told her partner, Detective Johnson, during one of their regular check-ins. Dr. Clark believed she was helping him, but maybe the system set them both up for failure. The house on Cedar Street remained unsold for another year after the trial, despite extensive renovation to remove all traces of the basement crime scene. Potential buyers seemed to sense the property's dark history. Eventually, it was purchased by a developer who demolished the house and built a small apartment complex on the site. Margaret Rothwell, the real estate agent who had first shown Detective Martinez through the house, often thought about the strange odor that had permeated the building. She realized now that it had been the smell of death seeping through the concrete floor of Marcus's makeshift. Marcus himself was transferred to a maximum security psychiatric facility in Eastern Washington, where he began serving his life sentence. His treatment team faced the challenging task of addressing both his criminal behavior and his ongoing mental illness. Dr. Sarah Thompson, Marcus's new psychiatrist, approached his case with a combination of professional caution and therapeutic optimism. She had studied Dr. Clark's notes extensively and understood both the progress that had been made and the delusions that had ultimately led to tragedy. "Marcus represents one of the most complex cases I've encountered," Dr. Thompson explained to her colleagues during a case conference. "His intelligence and insight into certain aspects of his condition are remarkable, but his core delusions about Dr. Clark remain completely intact. He still believes she is alive and that he saved her from imposters." The treatment team faced an ethical dilemma. Should they attempt to challenge Marcus's delusions about Dr. Clark, potentially causing him severe psychological distress, or allow him to maintain beliefs that provided him with psychological stability while serving his sentence? After extensive consultation with ethics committees and legal advisors, they decided on a middle approach. They would work on Marcus's overall mental health and social functioning, while avoiding direct confrontation about his delusions regarding Dr. Clark. This approach yielded mixed results. Marcus became more cooperative with treatment and showed improvement in his ability to interact appropriately with staff and other patients. However, he continued to ask regularly about when Dr. Clark would resume their therapy sessions, apparently unaware that she was dead. The case also had lasting effects on Dr. Clark's family. Jennifer Clark Morrison became an advocate for improved safety measures for mental health professionals, speaking at conferences and lobbying for legislative changes. "My sister's death was preventable," Jennifer told a gathering of psychiatric professionals 2 years after the trial. "Not by abandoning difficult patients like Marcus, but by implementing better safety protocols and recognizing warning signs earlier. Mental health professionals shouldn't have to choose between helping patients and protecting themselves." The Anna Clark case became a subject of study in medical schools and graduate psychology programs across the country. Students learned about the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries with patients while still providing compassionate care. Dr. Patricia Knowles, the forensic psychologist who had testified during Marcus's trial, used the case as a teaching example in her courses on criminal psychology. "The Clark case illustrates how mental illness can distort perception and judgment in ways that lead to tragic consequences," she told her students. "It also shows us the importance of understanding delusion systems and their potential for violence, even in patients who appear to be making progress." The case also influenced policy discussions at the state and federal levels about funding for mental health services and the balance between patient rights and public safety. Some advocates argued that Marcus's case demonstrated the need for more involuntary commitment procedures for potentially dangerous patients, while others maintained that improved voluntary treatment options would be more effective and ethical. Helena and Professor James Delano, Marcus's parents, struggled with guilt and grief in the aftermath of their son's conviction. They had recognized signs of his mental illness years before Dr. Clark's death, but had been unable to convince him to accept treatment. "We tried everything we could think of," Dr. Helena Delano said during a rare interview with a mental health journal. But Marcus was very intelligent and could appear rational when he needed to. The system made it almost impossible to get him help against his will, and by the time he was finally hospitalized, it was too late. The couple established a foundation focused on early intervention for young adults showing signs of serious mental illness, hoping to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedy. 5 years after Dr. Clark's death, her former colleagues at St. Helena's gathered for the annual memorial service in her honor. The event had become an opportunity for reflection on the challenges and rewards of working in mental health. Dr. Richards spoke about the lasting impact of Dr. Clark's work and the lessons learned from her. Anna Clark represented the best of our profession: compassion, dedication, and unwavering belief in the possibility of healing. Her death reminds us that this work carries real risks, but it also reminds us why that work is so important. Every patient we help, every family we support, every life we save is a testament to Anna's legacy. As the years passed, the intense media attention surrounding the case faded, but its impact on the mental health community endured. New safety protocols, improved training programs, and better understanding of patient-therapist dynamics all trace their origins to lessons learned from Dr. Anna Clark's tragic death. Marcus Delano continued to serve his sentence, his brilliant mind still trapped within the delusional system that had destroyed 2 lives. Occasionally, he would ask his treatment team about Dr. Clark, wondering when she would return to continue their therapy sessions. His questions served as a constant reminder of the complex relationship between mental illness, violence, and the healthcare professionals who dedicate their lives to healing. The basement on Cedar Street was gone, replaced by new construction that bore no trace of the horrors that had once unfolded there. But the memory of what happened in that underground prison continued to influence how mental health professionals approached their work, always mindful of the delicate balance between helping patients and protecting themselves. Dr. Anna Clark's story became more than just a cautionary tale. It became a call to action for better training, improved safety measures, and more effective treatment for individuals with severe mental illness. Her death, while tragic, contributed to changes that would protect other healthcare workers and potentially save other patients from following Marcus Delano's path into violence and delusion. In the end, the case of Dr. Anna Clark and Marcus Delano served as a stark reminder of both the importance of mental health care and the very real dangers faced by those who provide it. It highlighted the need for continued research, improved treatment methods, and ongoing vigilance in protecting both patients and providers in the complex world of psychiatric medicine. The truth that police discovered in Marcus's basement was more than just evidence of a crime. It was a window into the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness and the tragic irony of a healer destroyed by the very person she had tried to save.